Last week we talked about 5 reasons people hated the band Megadeth, which was inspired by an interview that Dave Mustaine himself had done on the topic, where he believed that it was mainly linked to the Megadeth and Metallica rivalry that occurred after his dismissal from Metallica. So what's good for one is clearly good for the other, correct? Yes, last week we spoke of 5 reasons people disliked Megadeth. We have to do the same for Metallica, who is one of the biggest bands on the planet and certainly one of the biggest heavy metal bands of all time. Now, some of these are going to be more recent reasons, considering it's one that seems to be evolving a little bit, but there are also a few reasons that are within this that are an upward to 25 to even 30 years old. So without further ado, here are 5 reasons that people hate Metallica. And we start, of course, with number 5. Number 5 is that they're generic dad rock. Now, yes, there's going to be many people that will come on here that will say this reason is just people getting trolled, just people poking a little bit of fun and having a laugh, but there are a very large group of metal fans or music fans that will refuse to listen to older sounding music or old music because it is dad rock or is something that their parents enjoy. And think about this. Think about whenever you were young and your parents were telling you about some of the groups that they listened to growing up, and all the while were also criticizing yours. That's kind of what's happening here, only it's one that is now on a much more public forum considering the advent of the intranet. This is something that has been linked to bands such as Metallica, such as Slayer, and various others, even Black Sabbath. Metallica being one of the biggest bands in the world and one of the largest metal bands in history, of course, is not immune to this. Is this a silly reason? You bet your ass it is. Is it a dumb reason? Hell yeah, but is it a reason that's still out there? Unfortunately so. That brings us to reason number 4. It's hip to hate them. That's right. I don't know if this was something that's been this way for more than 10 years. It's certainly been more than 6, and I know one thing. I sure as hell didn't start this trend. There is actually an idea out there that it is hip to hate Metallica simply based around what other people say. They want to be ones that follow the crowd, and it's something that's not just reserved for the younger fan. This is one where older fans will even latch onto this, perhaps linking themselves to other groups or other styles and saying that Metallica was a group that was only good for a couple of years, but now is absolute trash. Either that, or always finding a way in which to place other albums, other bands, other things above this group, never really giving the appreciation to this group whenever the time comes. With that being said, there's an opposite side that perhaps links them to absolutely everything, so it might be hip to love them to them, or either that, or you could call them overly obsessive fans, but either way, this is something that does link to the hatred. Whether it be the hipness of actually disliking the group, either that or watching those who love obsessively and growing bane based around that. Whichever reason it may be, it certainly does cause the band to get a negative following. And that brings us to number 3, Lars Ulrich, Napster bad, Lars Ulrich. One of the biggest reasons that this group has gained so much negative reputation over the past 15 years has been the actions and words of Lars Ulrich, especially during the Napster bad age of this band. He became public enemy number 1, considering Metallica was one of the largest bands on the planet at that moment, and really still are, but yet was speaking out against the idea of downloading music, and many people felt that he was doing this through a method that made him seem like a pompous baby, one that made it seem as though his pockets were no longer going to be lined, which meant that he was going to go into the poorhouse and even starve there because the people in the soup kitchen would know who he was and would refuse to give him soup because he could just go buy it at a Ruby Tuesdays or something. Either way, this negative attention certainly caused a lot of fans to start to maybe sway away from the band, but most of which began to come back around the time of Death Magnetic's release in the latter portion of the 2000s. Metallica has been a band that after a certain point of time has had a bit of a roller coaster whenever it comes to their fan base, whenever it comes to people being solidly behind them, and those that sort of stray from the pack a little bit. Consider it as one of those biblical tales, you know, the shepherd that loses the sheep, and then the sheep eventually comes back, and the shepherd's like, okay, that's cool, welcome back, how's it going? There you have it. Lars Ulrich is still considered widely by many people to be public enemy number one whenever it comes to this band, and still is one of the most widely recognizable figures whenever it comes to people speaking out against downloading. The cartoon Napster bad is still present in the annals of the internet. You can still look it up and have a hearty chuckle every now and again, even though one final note remains, and that's the fact that Metallica is still around, and is Napster? It's hard to even tell what the people use to download things these days. I don't know. Especially considering Spotify exists. Ooh, what fun. Number 2, everything past the Black Album sucks. This is a commonly held opinion, one that has been around, like I said, for probably close to 25 years. It's something where after the Black Album really showcased such a little bit of a shift to that traditional sound that was displayed on the first 4 albums, Kill 'Em all the way up to And Justice for All, that it caused people to plant a little bit of dissent in the ranks. They felt the band was perhaps getting changed up a little bit. They started to blame different aspects. They started to blame the death of Cliff Burton as to one of the reasons why they changed the sound up a little bit. Maybe Jason Newsted had a little bit more writing that was going on. I'm sure people found ways to blame Lars, considering they also think that he should have been the one that died instead of Cliff. And, of course, one of the biggest aspects of this was Bob Rock. Whenever Bob Rock took over the production helm for this band during the 1990s, the first album was the Black Album, which did signal this change, but was also one of the largest albums, one of the best-selling albums of all time in history in the United States and abroad. This is a mammoth disc, and it is, of course, one that has been recognized for some mammoth controversy. After the Black Album, we got Load and Reload, which seemed to solidify people's ideas because the band was changing even more. They transformed into a little bit more of a hard rock band with a little bit of blues centered to the metal that surrounded. And then with the idea of I Disappear or S&M, just the wide variety that was seeming to follow, which was a very successful and very thrash-oriented 1980s, many people felt that this group had just simply jumped the shark. Saint Anger, of course, was the final straw, with I Disappear perhaps coming in a second place that is very, very close by. It almost seemed to signal the beginning of the end. At this point, this was an idea that was in full swing. Longtime Metallica fans decided they were no longer going to support the band, at least with their mouths. Their money has really stated a different story, considering whenever Metallica releases a record, it still typically goes to number 1 and has excellent sales days. So really, whenever you consider a lot of these reasons for hate, you have to also consider that a lot of these reasons sure aren't stopping people from going out and spending their money on a new Metallica record to see what it sounds like. So number 2 might seem like a bit of a blah, blah, blah. We're not quite sure. But yeah, one of the widest held philosophies on Metallica in the entire fandom is that everything past the Black Album sucks. And then that brings us to number 1, the tried and true, the almost cheapest, perhaps the cheapest reason for Metallica hate. 3 words: they sold out. After the Black Album, many things occurred that perhaps perpetuated this notion. Prior to the Black Album, the band had flowing, long hair and were known as Alcoholica. After the Black Album, they cut their hair, they cleaned up their image, and this was instead a group that was no longer representing the fears of thrash metal. Instead, this was a band that was attempting to adapt to the times to maintain relevance, considering thrash and glam metal had started to fall out of style in the 1990s with the age of grunge music. This was an example of a band that saw their scene end and another begin, attempt to try to meld with the times a little bit, which is the reason why the words "they sold out" start to permeate in people's brains and start to come out of their mouths. As the decade seemed to continue, Metallica seemed to just go further and further away from their core sound, which perpetuated the notion once again that instead of just selling out their image, selling out their hair, they now also were selling out their sound, selling out their music. Nobody wanted to acknowledge the idea that perhaps the band were doing something different. It just seemed like too big of a coincidence at the time that they were attempting to morph their sound a bit at the same time that thrash metal was becoming all but extinct in the public eye and the public ear among the mainstream. So, because of this, many people turned their backs on this band. Many people still consume the records, like we said and stated in number 2, but did not find themselves as directly associated with Metallica, as directly linked with the band as they once did. And of course, based around this they sold out notion, it actually amplifies a couple of the other reasons that people hate Metallica that we mentioned on this list. People that perhaps were kind of on board with Lars Ulrich quickly turned against him, especially after Napster Bad. It's certainly one where the whole sold out notion mixed with an idea about stealing music because of money whenever they're already rich perpetuates the idea that Lars Ulrich is an asshole and the band sold out. The whole hip to hate them idea, there was already people that had turned their backs and they were telling other individuals why they turned their backs and why Metallica should not be a band that should be supported, so that caused that. And the generic dad rock thing is just a bunch of dumbass teenagers being dumbasses. So that one might not be directly influenced, but it may be. Perhaps their dads even feel that Metallica sold out. This is one of the most polarizing opinions that are out there whenever it comes to Metallica, considering the notion of selling out is such an undefinable notion, but it is also perhaps the largest reason why some people hate Metallica. Is there a band that you wonder what are 5 reasons that people hate them? Place your thoughts and place that band in the comments below. Perhaps they will be the subject of a future episode of 5 reasons why people hate. And I don't always want to stick with the negative. Perhaps place an idea down below for a 5 reasons people love video. Probably not one that will be seen by as many of you, considering you guys seem to really be gluttons for punishment and hatred. What a world! But it will still be something that'll be done for those that do want to see it. I'm coverkillernation, and I hate all of you. That's not true. I'll talk to you later. Oh, and hey, while I have you, we're running a promotion here over on the CKN Patreon page during the month of March. If we can get to $250 on the Patreon page, we are going to be doing a 24 hours of CKN marathon near the end of April. What that is that there will be live streams, there will be videos throughout the entirety of a 24-hour period. So usually these end up having about 15 to 20 new CKN videos in one day, which is absurd. If we make it to $250, we're going to do that. So if you are interested in becoming a patron and supporting this cause, there's a link for that in the description box below. No pressure. If you do decide to become a patron and support this page and support this channel, I am tremendously thankful, tremendously grateful. You're wonderful. Mwah. Kisses and no homo. So where's my title card at? Oh, that's right. There was no title card. Where's my name card? Tell the people who I am. Tell them who am I?